Hey everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and today we've got another session of In Conversation With. Today I'm joined by a community organizer, a DevOps consultant, and a cloud advocate. So on that note, I'd like you to welcome Liam Gulliver.
Hello.
Hey Liam, how are you doing? You all right? Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome, John. It's nice to return the favour.
No, absolutely. And people will be proud that I did that in one take. Did you?
Yes.
You must be special, Liam. No, thanks for joining me. Obviously, I've known you, Liam, in a virtual sense over the last few months. As I said in the intro there, so you play quite a big part in the community yourself. You're a meeting group organizer. You've got your own thing going on with Twitch and obviously presentations and things like that. So yeah, we had a quick chat just before this session now, and I think we're going to really focus on understanding what you do for your day job, where you're going with that, what that's all about, and see where we go with the conversation. So I'm right in thinking your role at the moment, you're very much in the world of DevOps, and you're a DevOps consultant. You work with a team of guys doing that kind of thing. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, I've more made a bit of a jump to the dark side of management than anything else.
Sure.
But like I've got the luxury of being able to work for a digital consultancy, which means that I can draw on all my experience of working across various industries over the last, longer than I want to admit. So maybe 16, 17 years now. Where, I started out as a developer, building stuff in classic ASP. Back when there wasn't this concept of a front end and a back end dev, or even necessarily folks who would be what we now call SRE or anything like that. You did, I guess, and I don't really like the term generally, but I guess the closest is you were a full stack dev back then.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Did a bit of everything. It happened to be like for another type of consultancy and agency, and we'd be building stuff for different industries as well. From e-commerce sites through to case management systems to marketing sites and all that kind of thing.
Cool.
And then I moved out into the retail industry, specifically looking at warehousing systems and pricing and till management. And building all of that stuff in-house pretty much, along with even our intranet was built in-house. We did the lot, and I was there for a few years, and where I learned a lot about Agile and Scrum and brought that in, because then I took on that hat as part of it, not just the software dev. And a lot of it was also architecting those systems, because we didn't really have the concept of an architect. It was just me and a bunch of folks doing software dev. So we had to kind of do it all. And then into building software for the social housing market, which was building case management systems for incidents and that kind of thing. Or I've got a broken boiler and so on.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that then took me into mobile dev as well, to have mobile front ends on things and having different front end and back end devs on top of that. And that's kind of covered a huge chunk of it before I made the move into then a regulated industry, into HR and payroll. And that's when I really made the jump into a role that was specifically around the cloud and DevOps. I went from being a dev into a continuous delivery and infrastructure architect. Mostly because they let me pick my own job title, and I wanted to see how long I could make it and get away with.
Yeah, absolutely. We all do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Sorry, Liam. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, and then from there, I went into working for myself for a little bit, consulting and doing a lot of hands-on stuff around what we call DevOps technologies that we would say, I don't know, Azure DevOps, Kubernetes, Azure AWS, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Before making the jump to where I am now.
So it sounds to me like you've gone with your career path now, almost like a the opposite to where I've gone then. So I started off in the traditional kind of operations, did a little bit of dev, but moved into operations, and I've now coming towards the dev world, and you're coming at it from the other way, which is really interesting, really in today's climate, I guess, when we start talking about DevOps and what it means to people, and, you know, how do you implement DevOps and what do you need to do? So, I mean, how do you find the background? So from a dev perspective, and when you've done all of that work, 'cause it sounds like you've had a fruitful and varied career so far with all those different places that you've worked in, and the kinds of, undoubtedly, the different projects you've worked on. How do you see the industry transforming at the minute with this whole mesh of, you know, sort of dev and ops and the way things are going?
So I think, from my point of view, having started out as a dev gives me a different perspective on things. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better, but I think it definitely helps to look at it from the point of view of the developer, of the development team. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of however you want to paint DevOps, it's being, you know, I like to look at it as if it's a culture, first and foremost, because it is about the people. And then you've got your processes that sort of underpin that, and then tools that help to enable the processes. But the people that will be interacting with those processes and tools most of the time, the day-to-day, whether it be doing the continuous integration, the continuous delivery, even just building stuff locally, that whole developer experience piece sits with the delivery teams.
No, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, whether that delivery team is made up of purely developers or mixture of front end and server side, infrastructure engineers, site reliability engineers, DevOps engineers, even though I'm sure you'll have heard me by now. Anybody who knows me knows that I really hate calling them that.
I mean, it's an interesting concept, I find, things now, because, you know, we know we're in an age of kind of, as Satya Nadella points out, this tech intensity where we've all got to know as much as we possibly can, which, you know, it sounds glorious and magnificent, but it's really a difficult thing for an individual as somebody coming into a role, whether you're coming in from the operations side or you're a developer. Both worlds have kind of got different ways of doing their job, or should, if they're not currently doing their job in different ways, they should probably be thinking more of the other sort of, you know, side of the coin, so to speak. So, I mean, you know, when I look at my career and where I'm going, and I'm moving into, you know, a cloud platform like Azure, from an operations point of view, a lot of architectural things that I do with my customers are about, you know, bolting bits and pieces together and building an architecture for a solution to be hosted in the cloud. Now, it sounds great, and, you know, Microsoft have done a sterling job with, you know, sort of the Azure portal and being able to point and click and drag and drop things, but of course, the more you get into that, the more you realize, well, okay, that's great, but there are other ways of working which very much lean on, you know, if you've got a dev background, you know, and what I'm talking about, things like infrastructure as code, the ability to use things like ARM templates and Terraform and scripting and Python, PowerShell. Traditionally, you know, I'm speaking from the operations side, I guess, those folk don't necessarily have that, you know, that deeper dive skill set, and that is a very big generalization. I appreciate that, but when you compare it to a person who's come from a development background, that's a 9-to-5 worker, do you see things in a similar way, but from maybe the other side? So from a dev moving into understanding more about the ops, you know, what's your view on that, Liam?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, it can be quite difficult to engage with folks from a dev end, to want to care about things like the infrastructure, to want to care about the thing that their system is running on. But to me, you know, that's one step removed from where it needs to be. You know, if you're building something, you should also know how to run it and be responsible for running it. You know, and I think ultimately that lends itself to having things where you've got, like, I'm a huge advocate of everything as code. So that's your builds, that's your infra, you know, that's product, and it all counts as product code to me. So it should all be treated.
On that note, Liam, is it worth kind of spelling it out a little bit? You know, in I say simple terms, what does everything as code mean? You know, if you're looking at it from a dev side, undoubtedly skill sets, that makes sense. But if we look at it from an operations point of view, to maybe somebody that hasn't dabbled in the dev world, so to speak, what does everything as code mean to somebody like
so,
that?
So to me, it means it's not just the code that builds the product. So it's not just a C# or your Golang or whatever. It's not just features. It's building out that infrastructure with Terraform. It might be building out your tests in Gherkin. It might be building out your compliance with like Azure policy in ARM templates or Terraform or that sort of thing, and building out your CI/CD pipelines as maybe YAML in Azure DevOps or in GitHub Actions. That whole approach around that is then supported by the same processes the product code should be. So that would be, if I want to make a change, I'll create a branch, I'll make my change, I'll test it, and then I'll submit it for peer review. And there might be automated builds on top of that verify my changes. Could be through linting for compliance with something like TerraScan. It could be actually making sure that it's valid and deploy something. So like in the past, what I've done is I've had continuous integration builds that actually not just run a validation, but physically go and set up a set of infrastructure and then tear it straight back down again to make sure it's all valid and the configuration's valid.
So why would that process of your kind of utopia of everything as code, why would that be an important thing for a business to consider in this day and age? You think what would be the key things there for them to kind of consider? Okay, for one, I might not have the internal skills to be able to, if we look at it from the DevOps mentality where you've got the culture, so you've got to have the right people that are willing to go on this journey that either work for your company or, work for your partner or whoever you may have outsourced this kind of work to. But why is it important to put everything as code? Like you just described, but what are the key benefits, do you think? And what should people be looking out for when they hear these terms?
So I mean, this is a big chunk of personal opinion, and this is the way that I look at things. But in my opinion, I think it makes things more transparent. I know that there's businesses in the world that have a DevOps team, and they're this box that things go into, and then stuff comes out, but nobody knows what happens in that box. I think through an everything as code approach, everybody involved at every touch point can see code changes for the application, for the infrastructure, for your tests, and then you can see those changes go in step as they go out as a release. They will all get versioned together. They will all be, okay, well, I know for me to run version 1.1 of Parts Unlimited, these are all the bits that will need. This is the configuration that we deployed at this time with this version of the software. I can trace it all the way back through my ALM system, such as Azure DevOps, or like I say, or again, you get back so I can see that tied back to my work items, because I'll have all those policies in place around it. And I think kind of almost above all else, on top of that, because it's transparent and it exists as code, if people want to learn about it and learn about the system, they don't necessarily have to go to a wiki and read through drabs and drabs of documentation. They could take a look at the code itself, read it, or even check it out to their machine and spin up their own flavors of it and learn that way.
I couldn't agree more, Liam. I think, in the short period of time that I've kind of started dabbling over in the world, because, I think I realize, again, I'll not to labor the point, but from an operations perspective, I realize that there is a certain amount of skill set that you need to be able to kind of, knock down the barriers to entry to kind of doing these things. So, starting off with the likes of Terraform and Docker and Kubernetes and all these new, even down to serverless compute, with some of the stuff that's going on there. But when I first discovered about this concept of everything as code, I think it was that light bulb moment that went off above, in my head. It's like, okay, like you've just described there, DevOps culture is very much about that openness, being open, not being the custodian of this little piece of work because that's what my job tells me to do, and thou shalt not pass and all that. I'm not going to tell you how I've done my little bit of work, but just that everything is code, it kind of knocks all of that down, doesn't it? I think, it's not that the way that I understand it is that, look, wherever you are as a business today, within a week, you're not going to be at that position of everything as code. If you've not started on that journey.
Yeah, it's a long road to get there, and I think there's also the element of zero trust is a great thing, right? From a security standpoint, zero trust, even from an organizational standpoint, is great. But there's an element, I think, where people look at DevOps and go, well, that means I've got to be transparent. That means I've got to do all these things. That means I've got to trust all these people. It's like, well, that's partly true, right? But zero trust doesn't mean that you don't trust anybody. Like, it means that there's trust within a set of constraints, and DevOps can work within those constraints.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think that's the thing.
I mean, it's just a really good, good concept to kind of understand, because, certainly for me, when I've started learning of the, a few bits and pieces, obviously I do a little bit of public facing blogging and bits here and there, and I get asked questions, really, what is that about? Or how do I do this? Or why would I want to do X, Y, Z? And I think it's quite easy sometimes to forget that when you're kind of focused on the constant learning, the constant, right, let's keep up with the latest and greatest, that in the business world, or in your company or in a customer's company, it's easy to forget that people aren't at that level with you. So what would you have any kind of advice or tips for somebody looking to kind of start out on their journey with DevOps? If I caveat that and say, we all understand how important culture is, and you kind of need to work on that. But if we kind of move over to the kind of process and mainly technology, are there things and tips that you've learned over the years, Liam, that have helped you do your job today, and that you could kind of impart for others watching, maybe?
Yes, but I don't think everybody's going to like it.
No, go for it. I think that's what it's about.
Everybody is different.
Yeah,
you can't take what works for one business. Let's say Spotify, for example. In fact, the Spotify engineering model is a great example for this. Worked great for Spotify back in whenever it was, like 2014. I think it might have been before that. You can't take that whole process, that whole culture, that whole way of working, copy and paste it over yours. It will doom you to fail straight away. What you can do is figure out, okay, well, why would I even want to do this in the first place? Is it because I want to ship 100 times a day? Is it because I don't get feedback fast enough? Is it because I know that whenever we put a product out, whenever we ship a release, we end up with all of these problems and all these bugs, and we're not catching them early enough? So how do we solve that? What problem is it that you're trying to solve by picking up sort of a DevOps way of working? And I think once you know that, then you can start to plan for that change. So let's say, for example, all right, well, I want to be able to ship 10 times a day. Okay, well, what's stopping you? If you're shipping once a month now, what's stopping you from going from that to 10 times a day? You could quite happily set up your continuous delivery process to ship every time you push a commit back if you wanted to. Obviously, that's going to cause problems. It's going to highlight where your process is missing gaps and that kind of thing. Obviously, don't just go and do this, folks. Just as a disclaimer, just don't just go. Yeah, all right, I'm going to go and start shipping this. For
Liam said to spin up a Jenkins server
this on a YouTube show.
Yeah. No. I think I know what you mean there. So it's a case of, don't just look at the technology that you got today and all these nice whiz bang demos, and it's great to have that vision, but just appreciate that you need to understand how that fits within your business. Is I think what you've just said, isn't it? Is that, every business obviously is different. So just look at the things that are in front of you. On that note, Liam, so, obviously we talk about shipping code and shipping versions of software, whether they're features or whether they're new, whatever it may be. When you turn your attention to kind of, the ability to kind of use CI/CD pipeline technologies to kind of build infrastructure. Now, in my experience, obviously infrastructure typically isn't changing on that kind of frequent basis. Is there anything from that perspective that kind of is completely opposite to kind of shipping code, in a software development sense, when you're looking at infrastructure as code? Are there any things that you've learned over the time of looking at it that you think are important to know about, or could they be treated as one and the same process, but just obviously specifically for whatever you're doing for an infrastructure deployment? That's great. You can use all the same technology. Do you know what I mean? Is there
Yeah,
kind of a difference?
I think so. Like, to me, I don't think there is a difference.
Okay.
I think there's enough technology out there now that lets you treat things with the same scrutiny that you would your application code.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I can unit test my Terraform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could use something like TerraTest, and I could write unit tests for that. I could use, like say, TerraScan or Terraform compliance to go and make sure that I meet my policies or that compliance need before I even ship something.
Sure. Yeah.
And what I tend to do is I tend to run that Terraform or ARM or Bicep or CloudFormation, whatever you want, every time I deploy something.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it manages your configuration drift as well. So if somebody's gone away and made manual changes, other than telling them, please don't do that, and trying to find out why, so to stop it from happening in future, you're not there to tell people off. But it means that it brings that back in to a state that is tested with the software that you're trying to ship.
And on that point, Liam, that's one thing that I think internally where I work, we've been talking around is that management of the state and almost having a reverse sort of extract of what your estate looks like from a cloud platform and then ingest that into something like Terraform or CloudFormation or ARM templates. And, even the choice of those utilities, so ARM templates, obviously ARM templates and CloudFormation, clearly there's, a bias on both of those.
Yeah, I mean, they're vendor specific, aren't they?
Yeah, but I think just understanding the nuances and the differences between what Terraform is going to do for you as opposed to what you can do for using an ARM template or CloudFormation. I'll always say the word wrong. It's something like I'm not even going to try it, but to me, it means that when you change something using Terraform, it keeps its state. So
idempotent.
That's the word that I'm looking for. See, I wasn't even going to try and I always get it wrong. But yeah,
I mean that whole pause was me thinking about how to say it. Don't get me wrong.
Did you just do a quick Google and then right?
Like, oh yeah.
But there's a genuine thing there that even to us techies, we're both techie guys, as I'm sure a lot of people are that are watching this. But just being open and honest with people's knowledge. Even trying to understand the difference between when would I want to use an ARM template over a CloudFormation over Terraform, or now we've got Bicep as another framework type product to help with ARM templates, as I understand it. I've not personally looked into it a great deal at the moment, but I'm sure I will at some stage. Have you had the same kind of path that I've had with, it's great and we can learn about it all, but how do we sit back and go, well, okay, I want to choose this path or that path? Are there any tips that you picked up?
I guess from my point of view, listen to the people telling you the reasons for using something. Be more open to it. I was staunchly in my primary background is in Azure for when it comes to the cloud stuff. So all of my experience with infrastructure as code prior to a few years ago was doing it all in ARM templates, and I was a staunch advocate of ARM templates. Love ARM templates. Happy to read JSON because again, that coming from a dev background, I find it not that much of a hardship to read it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It made a lot of sense. I could have everything as code, even my configuration, and everything. But when you start to get into the realms of, okay, well, how do I want to treat this code? And again, going back to what I was talking about earlier. Now, I could be wrong because it has been a few years since I've looked in this area now, but I can create my unit tests to test Terraform. I couldn't do that with ARM templates back when I was last looking at them. Mm-hmm. I'd have to use additional things on top, like Chef or Puppet or that kind of thing, to be able to do the same sort of level of testing that I want to, which would mean I might have to deploy something. And I want to try and avoid that if I can. Because, there'll be some systems that take quite a while to provision. Like, I remember before App Gateway V2 came along, it'd take a good 20-30 minutes for an application gateway to provision. And that's just time that I don't want to sit around waiting to spin up my infrastructure to test it. Whereas now I can go, all right, well, do my rules make sense? I'm checking to see if I've got port 80 open here. I don't want port 22 open here, and that sort of stuff. And I can do that at build time, at the point of every commit, and it can take seconds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's, like you say, it's important to. I suppose what I did was try and look at the look at the broad spectrum of tools and things that you can kind of use. And you mentioned things like Chef and Puppet and Ansible. I mean, clearly there's a lot of overlap with a lot of these tools and products that you can kind of do sort of infrastructure deployment, and some go a bit deeper on the configuration side, the OS level. And it's really just finding, it's like a big bag of tricks, isn't it? The way I understand it, it's right. Okay, what are you trying to do? And of course, but I suppose the difficulty that I see from my perspective is it's great. And it really is great. I mean that genuinely, but there's a hell of a lot to learn. And, you're back to this thing that we kicked off with, this whole tech intensity of staying on top of this. And, I mean, I don't know what version Terraform's at now, but I don't think it's even reached version 1 yet.
Things like 0.14, maybe?
1.4, I think it is, something like that. But, the constant frequent change, and that's without, like you say, I'm the same as you. I predominantly spend a lot of my day job in Azure. So even keeping up to date with, I think in my video I did the other day was, wow, we got 27 updates today. Right, I'm not going to read all of these out, but there's, have you got any tips for kind of trying to keep on top of that, or is it just simply, find the time? How do you kind of handle that?
I tend to stick to areas that I need right now. So, like at the moment, I've been doing a lot of work with AKS, for example. Which is a whole other kettle of fish,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that my solution needs to fit in AKS that looks like this, and that's and how do we achieve this thing that looks like this now? Okay, that's great, perfect, got that working. What's next? How can we improve? Come back to improve this later, because that's the other thing as well, right? Like when you're building an application, you're always looking to continuously improve it to keep users coming back to your app, to keep money flowing into the business.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
And it comes back to treating your infrastructure the same, but focus on the bits that you need to be touching next, or focus on the areas that are the most painful, perhaps. So you might have, I don't know, you might have Databricks running that are costing you thousands of pounds a month, or a Cosmos DB that you've managed to get to cost you nearly £1 million by the end of the year. Start looking at ways to improve that. Okay, it's like, well, what if we didn't have this Cosmos DB running all the time? What if we only spun it up when we needed to? How much of a hardship is it for us to not have this much data in our test environment?
Sure. Yeah. So it's just learning things as you come across them, project by project, or if you work for a single business, as and when you realize that if you are doing app development, okay, learn the bits you need to learn. And I suppose, coming at it from probably both our lines of work, we deal with multiple customers, different customers with multiple different requirements. So understanding what one technology does as opposed to another technology, personally, I find it sometimes a difficult place to be, because we simply don't know all the answers. But it's just about being able to find things out quickly.
And I guess the other option, well, it's not really an option. It's the other thing with it is, and I think it's the hardest thing. It's definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my career, and I'm sure you're probably the same, John. Is accepting the fact that you just can't know it all.
And that's never a truer sentence has been spoken, because I think if we all look back, certainly IT pros, you're there as a consultant or an architect, and you look to as the font of all knowledge, and in most cases, that's true if you're focused on a single single application, a single thing that you've learned, and then it gets a release every couple of years. You can kind of be like that, but certainly now today, when we'll branch onto it now, no doubt. But when we start looking at moving from the traditional kind of monolithic way of building applications, potentially into something now that the newer way of working, I suppose, in terms of microservices and what that means, using Docker containers, and you mentioned it there, Kubernetes. we've just gone off into another world completely again. So, all of that has got a whole sack of tools that we can use to kind of make that good. Where do you see things going at the moment, Liam, in terms of that monolithic versus microservices kind of architectural approach, I guess? Are you seeing a mixed bag with customers still at the moment? Are you seeing customers want to go one way or another?
I think that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I guess. I think that ultimately there is a time and a place that's right for microservices. There's a time and a place that's right for monoliths.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a startup and you need to get something in there, out there to get folks coming to your application, to start generating money for your business, and if monolith it is faster for you to build right now, you build the monolith.
Sure.
When I sat down, I think it was last week. So I sat down to record an episode of the Agile Engineering podcast that I do with a bunch of folks from Azure, as well as Louise Paling and Misha Bell, who were really great. And we had Kelsey Hightower come on the show from Google, and we were talking about sort of can DevSecOps be damaging. We actually got onto this sort of monolith versus microservices conversation. He said something that really kind of stuck with me in around this whole process in architecture point is you could have the best architecture in the world, but if you spent all that time and effort doing that and nobody uses your app, well, the only way you're going to make your money is writing a book on how not to do it.
And that's a great bit of advice, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
To think of it. Yeah.
It's like, cool, great. You can have scaling and you can have it now, but do you really need it now? Mm-hmm. If you're only expecting 100, maybe even 1,000 users to start with, and you know that you can cope with it, you do performance tests early enough that you can say, 1,000 are no problem. Then you don't need a microservices application right now. When you're looking at that higher quantity, that actual scale that you need to be able to say, all right, well, I need to be able to scale my inventory service or my shopping cart service at certain times of day, or we're going to have a sale on, and I don't want to scale everything because it's too costly. And you can manage, you can optimize your costs by having that kind of individual scalability. Then maybe that's a time to start thinking about it. But do you need it all of the time? No, probably not.
Yeah, and I think I tend to agree with what you just said there in terms of you're back to just understanding what your problem is, and that's no different to if you're developing applications, if you're deploying infrastructure, all this whiz-bang technology, which I'm not poo-pooing the slightest because it's all great stuff, and I enjoy learning about it and trying to play and tweak and develop things with it myself. But when you turn to the business sense, it is really a very simple, straightforward thing. What are you actually trying to do? And, what tools do you need to use to get to where you need to be? And I suppose it's just remembering, even as techies, and again, there's probably quite a few techies hopefully watching this episode now, but just realize that as a technical person, you want to rush at all of these new fandangled technologies, but when you're applying them in business, there's really a very simple way of looking at it. Like you just pointed out there, what you're trying to achieve, and is it going to make the business any money? And I suppose the one thing that I picked up around sort of, if you take it from the perspective of a developer or a team of developers. Why you would want to go for maybe microservices or a monolith, or microservices over a monolith kind of approach, is really for that separation of, being able to work on individual components. So microservices of an application or of something, and have those hopefully not interfere with the larger project. So I guess, is there any kind of merit in looking at the kind of microservices, so looking at containerized applications, as your architecture to start off with from a software development perspective, over the traditional monolith waterfall methodology of an application? Is there any I suppose what I'm trying to ask is, have you seen any shift towards that? Okay, there are other benefits for using microservices over and above the infrastructure, the scalability, and the quick spin up, spin down. Have you noticed any other reasons as to why a microservices architecture might be preferable when you're starting a brand new app, for argument's sake?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of moves away a little bit from the containers aspect, but the jump to serverless would makes a lot of sense. Now, whether or not it takes more cognitive effort to be able to change the way that you think to be able to build a serverless application, because you're looking at really small units of work there, right?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know how to measure how much effort that is on top of building an app. If I just spun up Visual Studio, created a new solution, and off I went. But being able to work in that regard at such a low cost, to me, the cost of running it outweighs the costs of saying, okay, well, I need to think about the architecture in this way, or I need to think about how I build my application in this way. Now, having dabbled enough with it, like we'll caveat this with, I don't write application code day to day anymore. It's been a
neither do I.
few years since I've done that. But you'll have seen on Azure Live when we did our Christmas special, where we built everything in function apps, and we used serverless across the board where we can, from cognitive services through to even Azure table storage and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a pain to get it all running locally before we could ship something out. We were essentially working in Azure for the most part.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas when you're looking at things like, okay, well, what if I just created my app as a project and I ran it locally with my local SQL server, or if I ran it all as containers and I could do Docker Compose up without having to do like Minikube or anything like that. Like, why should I go down this route? It kind of brings you back to the developer experience is the thing that kind of matters as importantly as the thing that's being built. Because if they're not going to find it easy to build, for a start, they're not going to enjoy it, which will then lead to people not putting 100% in to what they're building. And unhappy devs leads to an unhappy app, right? And that's...
I suppose we're back to that whole tech intent, and this is what I suppose I'm trying to say at the beginning of our conversation is that, the likes of me and you, we do a little bit of community work. We're out speaking to various different people.
So you say a little bit, John.
Say again.
So you say a little bit.
Well, a fair amount. but we're out there speaking to we're not just in our day job, just focusing on what we or our team is doing. We're out, getting like this. We're having a chat now about these things and getting other people's opinions and perspectives. And I guess I've slightly lost the train of my thought here, but I suppose from the perspective of when we talk about serverless, it might be important to kind of, just for those that might not have, an idea of what serverless is, serverless, the running joke is that serverless doesn't mean that there are no servers, it absolutely is running on servers, but they're just hosted and fed and watered and maintained by the likes of Microsoft in the Azure cloud. But I suppose we're talking about things like Azure Functions, Logic Apps, those kind of things. And one of the things I found in my studies and my research about the new technologies, obviously, is Microsoft seem to have come at it from the perspective of, we know the motto from a few years back has been, they want to empower everybody to be able to do more. And I see that bleeding through from a serverless perspective, because they've almost got two trains of thought. You've got the low code, no code serverless, which is things like the Power Platform, so Power Automate, and I forget all the names, but you've got Power Automate, Power Apps, Power BI, and then you've got the the kind of Azure Functions, which are pretty much coming at it from a developer point of view. So Microsoft seem to offer two flavors of serverless, essentially. Do you see that, Liam, in what you've noticed, or am I just speaking absolute nonsense?
I mean, I guess so. There's function apps where you write code and you deploy it, right? And in fact, I might have a diagram for this. So let me dig it out.
There we go. So you can see that. So yeah.
Cool. I guess that we can cut that faff bit out.
Which bit?
the faff of working out how to send something across to each other.
Yeah. No, we'll leave it in,
Right. So, so what we've got is this kind of new, like everybody's familiar with this diagram, right? Or at least part of it. So where we've got the difference between legacy and IaaS and PaaS and software as a service.
Yeah.
This is kind of like an updated version to include containers as a service and functions as a service as well. So the idea is this is about building, pizza.
Yeah.
You want your homemade pizza, which means you're gonna have you're gonna have to have electricity or gas. You have to have the oven, a fire, pizza. You're gonna have to have the drinks, the friends, and the conversation. You have to provide it all yourself, right? So as we move along to the right, where we have this purple column now with this function as a service, you're providing the conversation and the friends. So you're deploying the functionality and the configuration of those functions. Whereas where you're talking about I think the managed service aspect of serverless, where you have consumption-based services like cognitive services or even application management gateways.
I think what I saw, Liam, was the one track. So when you look at, I'm just trying to think now. So you've got Logic Apps, for argument's sake.
It's still serverless though, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what I'm trying to say here is that Microsoft seemed to have come at it to target two different audiences. So Logic Apps would be targeted at your developer because they're very much written. I mean, I know there's a nice little GUI interface with them, but they're written as code essentially within Azure. And the equivalent to Logic Apps, in fact, I think Power Automate actually is Logic Apps, but just in a more user-friendly, dare I say it, manner to enable maybe those less or non-technical people to an entry point into the.
I don't know if it is. I think in terms of Power Automate, when you look at that versus the Logic Apps Designer, there's very little difference between the two.
Yeah.
You can build them the same way. They use a lot of the same connectors. There's a lot of simplicity there. I think just with I guess the difference is between the serverless Logic app versus the function app is one is a high code and one is a low code approach or even a no code approach. And the fact that I could build an app now to say, okay, well, I just want to take a HTTP post from something and then transform it and then spit it out into something. And I could get that up and running in a few minutes through what is effectively a point-and-click adventure. Is great. That's an immense amount of power. Without trying to make the pun there, to be able to do that. And I can then take that logic design and I can take it to whoever in the business who isn't technically minded and say, okay, is this the logic that you want? Is this the sort of flow you envisioned? Without having to go down that longer route of writing all the documentation as well. It's almost, I guess that's it. It's kind of almost self-documenting in a way, in a more non-technical friendly fashion.
I was just looking at this diagram there and thinking, what is Soda? Then I noticed on the right, okay, Soda is our scaling, which is cool. Yes. So that's cool. I mean, it's the first time I've seen this diagram with functions and containers, like you say, included, which is pretty cool. That's a nice little takeaway there for anybody that hasn't seen this before. But I suppose it's that whole thing again. We've covered a breadth of technologies from the Devops toolkit to we talked briefly about containers and obviously AKS within Azure, so Kubernetes services. We talked serverless, and when you kind of boil it all down, that you're trying to do something, it's fair to say there's a lot of different things that you can use to do that something with. And I guess, what would be your advice to anybody that, even if it's an IT pro that is a seasoned person working in IT, let alone a newcomer to the IT, would you have any advice for where to start or how to tackle this great wealth of technical ability?
I'd say figure out what problem it is you're trying to solve. I mean, that has to be your starting point. Or that could be as small as, like, say, maybe I want to move to the cloud from on-prem.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
What do I do? There's a lot of different ways you can start that as well, right? To me, the best starting point is start with building out your infrastructure as code. Start with the Terraform.
Well, there's one step before that. Find out what you've actually got.
Well, yes, there's also find out what you've actually got. Yeah.
What have you got? I say that tongue in cheek, but the amount of customers that I've gone into, obviously mentioning no names, but you say, right, okay, Mr. Customer, what is it you're looking to do? And they genuinely sit there and go, not really sure. I don't really know what we've got. And the first thing is, look, do some form of an assessment over what you've got. And like you say, then what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go with this?
Oh, and I think you're absolutely right. So let's sort of take a step back and say, okay, let's work out what we've got, and then figure out what would be the lowest risk thing to move out of that sort of inventory.
Absolutely.
And then start with, right, well, if I know that I've got this little app right now, I know I'm using a web server, and I know I've got a SQL server running as well. Go to these. Firstly, take a look at your pricing calculator. To run the exact same spec that you're running right now, how much is it going to cost you to run? Yeah. Because there's an element to it as well that I guess comes under the cultural aspect, which I'm sure you'll have come across as well, John, where you're moving away from that capital expenditure of buying new servers every 3 years to operational expenditure where it is a line on a balance sheet every month.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that can be terrifying for people. Even if it does look like it's cheaper overall, seeing something that's going out of the account every month, that's now, well, why am I now spending 250 quid a month on an app service?
Yeah, I remember those conversations back when, I suppose it was back when people started the uptake of 365 a lot. There was that seemed to be every conversation was OpEx versus CapEx, and OpEx is the way forward and things like that for software as a service. And and even that, still today, there are businesses that still struggle with those concepts, like you say, that they used to be able to, for various accounting purposes, for being able to, depreciate capital and things like that. There's various reasons, but I'm not a finance person in the slightest. But it's just remembering that there is always a number of different non-technical reasons why businesses may have to do one thing over another. Yeah. I mean that's great, Leo. I mean, in terms of where we've gone now, we've talked around quite a lot, and it's some great insight that we've got that you've given us there. Thanks for going through that with us. I mean, in terms, I don't know if you want to switch gears a little bit now and start looking at community and what you're up to from a community point of view and kind of your thoughts.
Yeah,
and, I suppose.
I mean, I guess what am I not up to?
So yeah, I mean, I have washed this shirt since I did the recording with Pete, but I'm representing the Azure-ish Live community. So yeah, take us through what you're up to at the minute and what you've got going on, Liam.
Yeah, so the last sort of year or so, I started doing a little bit of blogging as well. So that's on, I think, lgulliver.github.io. I just use Azure Pages, GitHub Pages to do that. And there's a bunch of stuff about Terraform on there and container scanning as part of your CI/CD and building out static sites with storage accounts and Terraform and that kind of thing. So, and sort of even before all of that, kind of now for the last couple of years, I've been co-organizing a meetup called Devops Nuts, where we try to have like a technical speaker and a sort of more business focused or cultural type speaker every month. We run that on the last Tuesday of every month as well. We've had some really great speakers over the last sort of just over a year now. We've been running it. Obviously, we've had yourself, John. We've had Derek. I've actually had Pete as well. In fact, a lot of the community stuff I'm about to go into.
Is it going to be the way, Leah, that Pete's name has got to be mentioned in every
Pete's
single
name's going to come up a lot.
It's got to,
so's Jonathan's, I think. But it's through doing these meetups. This is how we all got together to start with, to start doing these things, right? We all met at one or various ones of our meetups and just ended up kind of staying back and talking afterwards.
Yeah.
Which I'll go into in a minute. But yeah, so like, we've had Pete Gallagher, so we've had talks on DevOps with IoT. We've had yourself to come along and talk about the Microsoft CAF framework. We've had Gene Kim come along to talk about the 5 ideals and the Unicorn project. We've had Martin Woodward come along and show us GitHub Actions as well. It's been some really fantastic stuff from the last year there. This month, I'm not sure when this goes out, but by the time it has, Tom Geraghty will have been on to talk around resilience engineering.
You record all these sessions, don't you, Liam?
We do. We have it live in Zoom, so folks come and join the Zoom. And then we also have our YouTube channel as well that we live broadcast them to, but then we leave them up afterwards as well.
Well, I'll get the links. We'll put them down below this video now. So if anybody's interested, they can link off to see those things. But you've got a session, you say, tomorrow, I think. So, yeah.
Yes.
Again, this is going out on Thursday, which is...
So it'll have been 2 days ago by the time this goes out.
There we go. Yeah, or whenever you're watching it. Cool. Yeah.
So, we're doing a lot there. And we've had various speakers covering AWS, covering Azure, covering things like Datadog for observability and monitoring, as well as those sort of cultural pieces that we were talking about. So, and then kind of off of that, Pete came to like the very first DevOps Not, so he's been to a few since as well. Jonathan came. I think he spoke at, it might have been like the second ever one we did, and that's how I got to know Jonathan. And obviously Misha co-organizes it with me and works for our main sponsor Rebel, and we've been working together on and off for years in varying forms. And then obviously there's Louise as well, who I knew anyway because I used to work for her. So she's always come to DevOps Nuts as well, and she's really supportive, which has been great. And we were finding that we were staying back for like maybe up to even an hour or longer sometimes, even after everybody had left, just sort of chatting through the sort of stuff that we're chatting through right now. And then sort of January last year, we decided, well, why aren't we just recording these conversations? Because we're having them all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Other people will surely want to have their input or even just listen to our waffle, really. And so out of that, we created the Agile Engineering podcast. We're about a year into that now too. And they're all available basically wherever you get your podcasts. And we've got some great guests on there as well. They're not all guests. A lot of it is just the 5 of us picking a topic that's been submitted for us to talk about, or just picking a topic and then going, right, well, let's talk about this. Let's combine all our various experiences and insights from across the different industries that we work in, and even look at it from a non-technical point of view as well, and kind of provide those insights there. We did a really great sort of short series in there around the Agile Manifesto and the Agile principles, and sort of talked about, okay, well, what does this actually mean to us and how have we implemented it wherever we've worked and that kind of thing. So that's been really cool. And then obviously Azure is Live, which we've been doing. I think Pete, Jonathan, and I had been talking about it for like 6 months, and then we just decided to go ahead and do it, and we launched that in October of 2020. And that started out as a single show called Azure is Live, and we run that every other Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. GMT. I
do try and catch it, but normally work gets in the way, so I have to watch it back on a rerun.
Well, I mean, that's it. We kind of try and do it as like a lunch and learn type idea.
Yeah.
And it's literally the 3 of us going, okay, let's set ourselves a challenge to build something or figure out how to do something. And it might take a couple of shows, because we limit ourselves to an hour, because obviously we're taking this hour out of our lunch to go and do it for folks. And we'll either code something together or we'll design something together and then build it in the next show. Kind of like those as show, probably showing our age a little bit now, John, but remember as a kid we used to get those magazines, like, do you remember Takeoff magazine?
Oh, I don't know about Takeoff, but
you got all the parts to build like a tornado fighter jet.
Oh, of course, yeah. I thought I was trying to relate it to some form of Commodore 64 then, but yeah. So Airfix type. Fix. Yeah.
So you'd get those like every week or whatever. Yeah. It might have been every couple of weeks, and you get a part or a set of parts to build this model.
Yeah.
And we're kind of running it like that, / like a little bit like scrap heap challenge kind of thing. You're going, let's build this thing, and we can only use these tools to do it, and that kind of stuff.
It's probably worth me interjecting there for people that are watching this, and that's probably where I think I first got in contact with you, Liam, and of course Pete and John, was watching those initial first few shows go out, and I think, to be honest, what got it for me is soon. I mean, if you're not subscribed to Azure, it's Azure-ish Live, isn't it? That your Twitter. Twitter/Azure-ish Live, but have you got a YouTube for that as well?
We have, but we don't have quite enough subscribers on it yet to have the fancy channel name.
There we go. So I mean, from my point of view, I think as soon as I saw it, that the retro look, the retro theme, the way that it looked and felt, and the concept, that the idea that, like you just explained, you're three, I mean, obviously 4 guys now with Derek coming on board with you guys as well. Just the ability to sit down and live stream or record a video showing a day in the life of a bunch of middle-aged guys trying to fix a problem. It probably doesn't have those screaming headlines right there, and I've probably done it injustice. But
no, I think that was our elevator pitch to each other. So that's what it was.
But I think it's quite comical. But from my point of view, I'll switch it on. I'll watch you guys, like you say, just waffling away, talking to each other, throwing ideas. And it is exactly like you would solve a problem if you're in a team of people in work or you're dealing with something. But it's just, you're looking at maybe technologies that the viewers don't know much about, such as I would be watching. And I think
that's it as well. Like, I don't think there's much. Granted, there's lots of people doing live coding, this, that, and the other. I don't think there's a lot out there where folks are going, actually, let's build something with this that could be really useful. It's like the first project we built on the show. One of the ideas that we had from the get-go with the whole look and feel is, like, at the bottom of the screen, we wanted to show what our latest Git commit was. Mm-hmm. Like in the background, we use OBS and everything else. And it meant we would have to build something to be able to do that. So we built it on the show.
Yeah.
And that's really the crux of it. Like, the next thing we're building is we're actually building a CI/CD pipeline around it. We're going to have multiple environments. It's still going to be for Git Watcher.
Yeah.
And obviously all the source for it is open source. You can go to our GitHub as well, which is github.com/AzureishLive.
You're going to have to send all these over to me now, Liam.
Don't worry. I have a README file for everything that I post for all these things.
Yeah. Cool.
But folks can even come and code with us live and open a pull request and say, actually, this would be better done like this. Because, we're doing it now. We're rushing, ultimately. We're trying to build something we're not necessarily doing it 100% right. We're not necessarily doing best practices. We're building something to ship for us to be able to use. And we're taking that sort of iterative approach on top of things.
And I think that's what did it for me to obviously watch you guys was exactly that. Look, this doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be polished. It might not be the neatest bit of work in the world, but I think Pete's described it to me as a scrap heap challenge type of approach, that you are just literally, and it's a great concept. And I'd urge anybody that's watching this to go and look the channel up, go and subscribe and watch the next couple of shows, because I really enjoy watching them, and obviously I'm sure there are many other people that will as well if they get signed up.
I think there's a really good thing around it as well. Like, you will see us fail because we do everything live.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's a big part of software development, and even working towards the sort of stuff we've been talking about tonight is being able to put your hand up and say, yeah, we got this wrong. Like, there's at least a couple of episodes where we've had stuff where we've built it and then it's not worked. within that time frame.
But isn't that life? I mean, that's typically, how many times have we all bought something, from a shop from, whatever, brought home some piece of electronics, plugged it in and gone, well, that doesn't work quite well, right? It's just a way of life. So I think, don't get me wrong, nice, finely polished demos that work from start to finish are brilliant, to let you know how things should work and what things should do. But then in reality, when you are sat down doing it for yourself or with a group of people, things don't work so well. So it's about, part of this is, how do you figure out what's gone wrong? How do you figure out what the fix is? Which is a great pull to the show as well, because there's no frills. You don't hide.
It's warts and all, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's great, and I think it's a breath of fresh air, because I think a lot of the time, like you said, there are a number of people, great people, doing some live coding things on Twitch. But I think that the concept that you guys have got, where it's almost like the Top Gear of the coding world, isn't it?
Yeah,
you just got to figure out which one of you's Jeremy Clarkson.
And that's it. It's three mates together doing what they love, dicking about.
No, absolutely. And it's I mean, have you got any, so you said you're going to be working on sort of on the Gitwatcher project as well, just building out into a CI/CD pipeline. Have you got any other grand plans or ideas floating around at the moment that you're thinking of doing?
So I would really, really, really like, and obviously we've not got anything confirmed or anything like this yet, because we don't really know how we're going to go about it. But I would really like us to do something with Azure Orbital.
Oh,
now,
satellites.
big crazy idea is, can we launch a small rocket with a small IoT satellite on? I mean, okay, granted, there's a lot more involved like that. Like, one, none of us know how to launch a rocket. Two, we can't build a rocket. Three, you've got to get a lot of approval to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, but look, shoot for the moon, isn't that what they say?
Well, and that would be a literal type thing. And I think there's maybe starting small with like a weather balloon and something, but it'd be really cool to try and do something with Azure Orbital. We'd really like to do that. We did a Christmas special this year that was about cognitive services and digitizing Santa's mailroom. But what I'd really like to is to push for something bigger every year as a special. If we could get to the point where we're launching something into the edge of space and then picking up with Azure Orbital, that'd be really great. But that's longer term.
To be honest, Liam, I think it's bold, it's brave, and it's a great vision to have something like that. I think that's an awesome idea. So if you need any help, you know where I am. It's,
absolutely.
I'll be there following Pete with my Pico Pi and my Raspberry Pi, going, look what I've done. But so have you got anything else? I mean, that's quite a grand thing to end the show on, I think.
Well, I mean, I guess so. Azure is Live. Like we say, we started with one show. We've grown it into a couple of other shows as well. Firstly, we have Azure After Dark, where a lot like we're doing now, John, and obviously you've been on previously, where we've chatted tech for a bit, and then we played some video games whilst chatting. And that's
humiliate me at Among Us, basically. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But that's a really great little format of a show to be able to do. We do that every week on a Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. GMT, and we have a different guest on every week, basically where we chat tech and play video games. And obviously we did a little Christmas special of that as well, where we had like a good 10 people on the show, from Kayla Cinnamon at Microsoft through to obviously Derek, who works for Octopus Deploy. We had yourself. We had Shabazz. We had so many people. I can't remember everybody. But what I'm really looking forward to trying to do in the next sort of 2 or 3 months, ideally, is I'd like to put together a charity D&D game. And we've already started the wheels turning on that, and we may have a special celebrity guest as well that'll be coming on.
That's cool. Just as I'm coughing, I normally bring a glass of water and put it there, and I've completely forgotten tonight. But I just cough, mute. But I was going to say, I've the last few shows, you've had some great guests on. In all fairness, over the last couple of weeks. So again, if you're not following, follow even join in, type in the chat, say hello to the guys as they're talking and talking away, and you know, you can. It's like an interactive show, isn't it, Liam? That you kind of put on there.
Yeah, it is, and I think we're looking at other games to play as well now. I've got a couple of ideas in terms of what would be really great. So, like Sea of Thieves would be great for us to have a crew,
Yeah.
or something where if you fancy watching us all get the crap scared out of us for an hour. I was thinking of have you seen that card game Phasmophobia?
No, I haven't actually. But is that a bit of a horror game? Is it? Or
Yes.
Okay.
And if you played in VR, we were talking about like Star Trek Bridge Crew and doing something with VR and stuff like that as well. But yeah, it like big plans for that this year of getting more guests, more games, and like I say, we're looking at doing a special couple of episodes, feature length episodes, where we're going to play a charity D&D game, and we'll do that live as well, where people can donate to that, and we're just working on an appropriate special guest who has preliminarily said yes. We just need to make the schedule work. Should be good.
Watch this space.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we're just over the hour mark now, so unless there's anything other pressing that you want to throw in there at the end, what you've got going on.
It'd be rude not to mention, obviously, our third show.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. Yeah, go for it.
So Derek obviously joined the channel just before he went on paternity leave with his new baby boy.
Congratulations, Derek, by the way. Yeah, congrats to him.
Huge congrats to Derek. I've caught up with him whilst he's been off, and he's loving it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it's great to see.
So yeah, there's Devops Derek Weekly, which will be back once Derek's back, which is run at 6 p.m. on Mondays. And we're really looking to grow the channel into a as close to a 24/7 content all of the time channel as possible. So, you know, folks, if you've got an idea that you think could work as a little show, it could be half an hour, it could be an hour, it could be pre-recorded, and you think it'd work within the confines of our Azure-ish live channel, then feel free to get in touch and we can have a chat about it.
Absolutely. Liam, it's been fantastic to have you on the show tonight. Thank you so much for giving up your time and coming to say hello to me and being on this show. So we'll put that out. All the links, it'll be hard pressed to remember all those links, Liam. So you're going to have to just send me through a Word document. They'll all be below the video there. So everything that Liam's mentioned tonight, all the various socials that Liam's got going on, you'll find them all below. So like I say, go and like, subscribe, follow, join in and get involved. But I mean, on that note, Liam, I'll say again, thanks so much for being a great guest for tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Not at all. It's been great, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, John.
Thanks, Liam.